All right, let's get this yap session started.
My life completely changed just because I started to buy real estate.
I started off in real estate probably the same way anybody else would have at the time who was growing up in Toronto and wanted to buy a house. Couldn't afford a house in the area that I was living in, finding things very expensive and kind of struggling to save money, so kind of forced to look elsewhere. But it's because of real estate that I was able to retire at a relatively early age. Pretty much by the age of 24, I was able to not work. And through this, I was really able to expand myself and give myself opportunities that I never thought I would have in my lifetime. And also find a business median that really suited me that would help me to achieve great things. But we're gonna talk a little bit about that later in the video. Right now, I wanna talk about you. You're here because you want to get into real estate, or you wanna grow and scale in real estate. You wanna leverage the industry in a manner that is going to elevate your lifestyle or bring you security for you and your family, your loved ones, in a way where otherwise working a job, you can't. And for one reason or the other, you might not be pulling the trigger, but then I gotta ask you, what's stopping you? So I get this question all the time, which is, if I had to start over again and achieve the same results that I did when I first got started in real estate, how would I achieve it in today's economy? In order to answer that question, I think we need to first identify what does it mean to retire. And I think that what it means to retire is to have enough of an income coming in so that you don't feel like you have to go out every day and earn your paycheck. So for the purpose of this video, that is the objective. My perspective is heavily influenced by two major parts of my life. The time when I was working and believed I had to do most things myself, and then there was the time when I realized that I was my biggest limiting factor, trying to do everything myself. You see, I think a lot of people want to get into real estate, but in today's day and age especially, they have almost these archaic mindsets when it comes to what real estate investing is and how this as a business medium is really supposed to work. It's a tangible asset, which is great, and it operates in a local market, but it doesn't mean that you as a real estate investor have to be thinking locally only. So in order to understand this, I think we first have to identify what it actually means to retire early. For some people, retirement means just not needing to work. For other people, it means having enough money in the bank so that you're completely secure. So for me, retiring early meant that you have a reliable source of income, which makes you feel more comfortable so that you don't have to go out and earn a paycheck every day, which is pretty much like a pension. Now, when I say I was able to retire at 24 years old, is because at 24, I was making something like $4,500 a month in positive cash flow, which for me at the time, that was way more than enough for me to live on. So how did I achieve that? Well, one of the things that I was fortunate with was that my mother got me into real estate relatively early, because when she found out that I had saved enough money working construction work to buy a car, she quickly hijacked my intentions and helped me to buy a house. Now, she didn't help me out financially. What she helped me out with was her credit, because I was working construction, I was working cash, and I didn't have any credit. So she helped me get a mortgage. And she had me buy a house in Hamilton, which at the time, this was something like 2006, the house was only $94,000, I believe, something like that. It was dirt cheap, but believe me, at the time, it didn't feel like it. That felt like a lot of money for Hamilton. But what was interesting to me, especially as an 18-year-old kid coming out of high school with a little bit of money, was that I bought this house, and then all of a sudden, that house was making me about $800 a month in positive cash flow. Saving became really easy. Now, adding to that, okay, I had a background in construction. My brother was in construction. My father was in construction. He had his own business. So maybe I had a bit of an advantage and I was able to go in and fix things myself. And that's great. It was a very hands-on approach. But the disadvantage I had was that I didn't have any credit, right? So I was fortunate that my mother could help me out here, but there's a lot of other people who would be able to qualify for mortgages where I didn't. So basically the formula went like this. I picked up that first property. It made me $800. And after that, I was able to open up a line of credit on that property. Pulled out a little bit of money, went out and looked for another one. I bought another property that made me $700 a month. And then I found another property after that made me $1,000 a month. And as I went through it, I was essentially able to buy about 2 properties a year. I did that for a few years until I was making about $4,500 a month in positive cash flow. And the standard I made for myself was this. I would only invest in duplexes and triplexes. Triplexes were the best because the first unit paid for your house bills, the second unit paid for your mortgage, and the third unit, that was all gravy. And at least then you're not at risk, because if one of your tenants stops paying, at least the house is still paid for and is only dipping into your profits. So when we're talking about how can you realistically retire with real estate today, the same principle still applies. How do you find the right market. And then what you need to do is you need to reverse engineer the numbers. You need to decide how much income do you need every month in order for you to retire. And whatever that number is, you need to figure out how many units you need to acquire in order to hit that benchmark. In Canada, or I think in Ontario, the average income is something in and around $58,000. Whatever it is, I'll put it here on the screen, but it's something in and around there, which means that in order to replace an income, you want to be earning $5,000 a month. Now that means that if you're able to, for simplicity's sake, find properties that each generate $1,000 a month in positive cash flow, you need to have 5 properties in order to generate $5,000. And then if you're going to find properties that generate $500 in positive cash flow, you need 10 properties in order to hit that goal. Now, if you could find properties that cost around $100,000 to $150,000, do you think you can figure out a way to acquire these properties and amass the cash flow you need in order to retire? Now, before any of you start giving me all the excuses as to why something can't be done, all the things that could happen, that could go wrong, let me just tell you, those thoughts, those voices, those excuses were the exact same thing people were telling me when I first decided to buy properties in Hamilton. People were saying, well, the neighborhoods aren't great, the city isn't doing too well, properties aren't worth it, the tenant profile isn't great, the house quality is bad, it needs a ton of renovations. Those problems weren't there, the properties would be more expensive, right? These are the opportunities that are in front of you. Now, you just have to look at the places where others see shit and you can see gold.
Nice.
That is it. So in terms of where to actually find properties in a different market earlier, in today's market, in today's economy, as a Canadian real estate investor, the only place we've been able to find properties like this successfully is actually in places in the US. The US has a variety of different markets, and one of the main differences between the Canadian markets and the US markets is that when the Canadian market goes up, it actually goes up across the board, and there's not as much disparity between different municipalities and provinces. Canada is just generally quite expensive when it comes to real estate, and it doesn't always make sense when you correlate it to the incomes that people have and also the taxes that we pay. But in the US, there's a lot more disparity between the cities, between the states, and between various different markets. Not just different markets, you actually have a lot of disparity between neighborhoods even. If you've been watching things on TV about the US real estate market, you'll know this. But what that means for us as Canadians is that in the same way that we were looking at a different market, calling it Hamilton, and going over there, which at the time it seemed like it was far away, and buying properties that were cheaper, today we're able to look at other markets in the US where properties are also cheaper, because we're able to find properties over there for actually similar prices to what I was talking about with Old Hamilton, around $100,000 to $150,000. And these properties all cash flow. And we're not doing anything special here. We're literally doing the exact same thing that we were doing 10 to 15 years ago when Hamilton was still considered a rough place. I mean, I think it's still considered a rough place. It doesn't matter, Back then it was a rough place with cheap properties. Today it's a rough place with expensive properties, whatever. But this is also a situation where you want to look at these markets and see whether it has all the upside potential that you actually want. Like, how much appreciation do you want? Do you have faith in the local economy? For example, when we're looking at other cities, one of the main things we look at is there a decent amount of positive population growth? One of the first places we started investing in the US was actually Cleveland. It was because it was reasonably close to Toronto. It's about the same distance north as some people are going to invest in places like Sudbury, but it's just south. So we thought it made a lot of sense to buy there, and we have been purchasing there, and our properties have been doing quite well. And again, we're finding properties there at about $150,000 all day, and they do cash flow. So if over there you can find properties that will comfortably make you about $500-$600 a month, USD actually. So actually you can find properties over there that will make you $500 to $600 USD in positive cash flow. If you're willing to look, find maybe an off-market deal, a wholesale deal, and spend a little bit of money to improve the property, you can definitely get a property like this going. How many of these do you need in order to subsidize your income to a point where you can retire or semi-retire? The truth is that this type of thing is possible. And when I tell this to people, there are those that say, yes, I can see this and I'm willing to take some action. And then there are those who are saying, oh yes, Andrew, but you know what? It's far away. It's in the States. I don't know if I can buy properties, and I don't know how all these people are doing this. And honestly, I've heard this stuff time and time again. People always have a reason as to why something can't be done, and you only need one reason as to why something can work in order to be successful. There are always a ton of reasons why something can fail. It's up to you to find the reason why something can work. So if you're the type of person that wants to use real estate as the business medium to fuel your goals and desires, definitely take action today, because the best thing that ever happened to me in this sense was that I got started early, and I want the same for you. If you have any questions about how to choose the right market or how you as a Canadian can start investing into the US market, definitely get in touch with us. I will be releasing more content on various real estate investing strategies for Canadians who are investing in the US, especially focusing on remote real estate investing. Until next time, I hope you found value out of this video. Make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.